For young minds, numbers can be quite abstract. Well, heck, the same holds for older minds as well. We're going to have to contextualize numbers as soon and as often as possible. And how? Through units of measure. When most of us think of units of measure, we probably think about things like minutes, seconds, feet, meters, things like that. And that's not a bad start because we can easily contextualize distance or time. But we must expand the application of units of measure if we want to understand some more advanced and abstract mathematics. We can include as units of measure things like chairs or bananas, pencils, M&Ms, cows, whatever, things we usually don't think of as units of measure. And we can do this right away as we start working with children. We can start when counting. When you ask a child, how many apples do you see? The child might respond with 5. Gently nudge them to say 5 apples. Try not to let that number hang out there without any context at all. How many bananas do you see? 3 bananas. Great. Sometimes you'll have to ask 3 what or 5 what. Just be patient, and when they respond correctly, be impressed. As we journey through understanding units of measure, it's important to keep conversions in mind. When we work with units of measure, we should always wonder if we could change them to some other unit of measure, if that's possible at all. The best example of this is when students are working with measures of volume, things like from cups to gallons. If we count 3 gallons of something, can we count it in another unit of measure? So we look to the famous gallon man conversion tip. 3 gallons is 12 quarts, which is 24 pints or 48 cups. The same thing goes with time. 2 hours is 120 minutes, which is 7,200 seconds. Notice the unit of measure keeps changing. It's important to keep conversions in mind. And now we go back to the 5 apple and 3 banana example. Apples and bananas are not the same unit of measure, but can we change that unit of measure to something like fruit? Now it's the same unit of measure. And we'll get more into that when we start adding and multiplying. But for now, it's important to distinguish very carefully and intentionally the difference between an apple and fruit. You may wonder why we have to emphasize this. I'll have more videos on it for details, but let's share some other units of measure to think about besides apples and bananas. What about fractions? Denominators are units of measure. The word denominator shares the same meaning of the word denomination, which means type. So fraction denominators are units of measure. Halves are not the same as thirds or fifths. What about variables? When we get there, variables can be units of measure. This term, 2x, can be read as 2 x's. This term, 7x to the third, can be read as 7x to the thirds. This term, 4 root 2, 4 square roots of 2. Notice how we can read each term to emphasize the unit of measure that goes with it. X's, x to the thirds, square roots of 2. If you can read something properly, you can understand it. Trust me. So as best you can, emphasize units of measure by asking things like 5 what or 3 what. The emphasis on units of measure will help children understand the context of numbers, and it will pay enormous dividends in math fluency and in more advanced and abstract mathematics. So remember, be patient and be impressed.